I don't know. I just don't know how to feel about people treating her like a celebrity. On her recent Instagram post, I think they deleted their comment, but the top comment was, yes, queen, first you slayed your mom, now you're slaying the internet. I read that shit, I was just like, this is weird.
And went on to force Gypsy Rose to use a walker.
So she just kept making up illnesses and diagnosed her own daughter with it and treated her like she had all of these illnesses.
Reason for Gypsy Rose being toothless? Oh, Dee Dee would use topical numbing agents, which made Gypsy Rose salivate all over the place.
Getting unnecessary surgeries for fake shit. You know how dangerous that shit is? You're getting your body opened up for no reason and drinking this kind of medication. Mental, psychological, physical abuse.
Is it fair that he is incarcerated for life for killing your mom and you're out?
Dude, you can tell Johnny was getting fucking annoyed, bro. Should we catch up on the Ruby Rose thing? Ruby Rose. Isn't that like a porn star? I meant Gypsy Rose. What's the Gypsy Rose story? I wanna understand this shit. I don't know the lore. I just think it's a little weird that people are like, I just don't know how to feel about people treating her like a celebrity. On her recent Instagram post, let's go to her Instagram. This is crazy, by the way. She was in New York when I was in New York. I think they deleted their comment, but the top comment was, yes, queen, first you slayed your mom, now you're slaying the internet. I read that shit, I was just like, this is weird. Okay, at the end of the day, she's a victim, but she still kind of got her boyfriend to murder her fucking mom. And then now that she's released from prison, she's going on like this press tour or like this national tour around the country and people treating her like a celebrity. It's just very like, celebrate her freedom. And this is before watching a video, by the way. Celebrate that she's free, but don't treat her like a god or something, like a fucking celebrity. I don't know. She killed her mom. Yeah, that's the thing. People were saying like she didn't kill her mom, but like I'm pretty sure there's like a term for that, where like if you get someone else to kill for you, it's like second or third degree murder or something like that. This one is the twisted story of Gypsy Rose. BJ investigates.
Who conspired to kill her mother is now out of prison. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was released from jail.
They look at these papers and say she's retarded. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Gypsy said
No.
believed she had several disabilities.
Oh my God.
Her daughter was in essence a hostage.
Going to Children's Mercy Hospital to see my beauties.
She got what she deserved.
According to
Yes.
Gypsy, yes.
Yeah.
She could put whatever in my body and I wouldn't even know.
Startlingly, it was Gypsy who went online to announce, that bitch is dead.
It just feels good to be honest. His multiple personalities would come out, and he had talked to me one day, and he was just like, I would like my other personalities to have a girlfriend. So I made up some individual personalities to match his other personalities.
He wants to get out.
What the?
Ain't gonna happen.
I'm excited though. I really want to learn about the details.
In early 1991, 24-year-old Claudine Blanchard and her 17-year-old husband, Rod, were expecting their first child.
17-year-old husband?
A baby girl they would name Gypsy Rose. Now, Rod had met Claudine when he was still in high school, and at just 17 years old, he had gotten Claudine pregnant. Shortly before Gypsy Rose's birth, in July of 1991, teenage Rod would tell Claudine he wanted a divorce, stating that he had gotten married for the wrong reasons. Gypsy Rose would be born in July 1991.
Very pretty.
Gypsy Blanchard always listened when her mother told her to do something.
How old are you? You're 1. I love you.
And Claudine would try to convince Rod to stay in the marriage, but it was a fail. It was a flop. So, despite her best efforts, she couldn't convince the teenage husband to stay in the marriage. And it was at that point in time that Claudine decided to move back in with her dad. Her dad was married at the time, so she had kind of like a stepmom. So she took baby Gypsy Rose and they moved back in with the dad. And even though Rod didn't want to stay with Claudine in a marriage, he did choose to stay in Gypsy Rose's life. By the time Gypsy
Okay, that's something. At least he didn't completely ditch his child.
was just a couple months old, Rod says that Claudine had started showing some alarming signs of paranoia about Gypsy's health care. She was basically inventing non-existent medical conditions for Gypsy out of thin air. By the time baby Gypsy Rose was 3 months old, for example, Claudine was convinced that Gypsy had a condition known as sleep apnea, which prompted Claudine to rush the baby to the hospital repeatedly for overnight stays and monitoring. Now, I just want to note that the doctors found no sign of any problems, but Claudine was insistent, and she continued to bring baby Gypsy Rose to the hospital for more monitoring and more tests. And that was really only the relatively harmless beginnings of these delusions that would turn insidious. As the months and years went on, Claudine's delusions about Gypsy's health would only grow. She would add more and more diagnoses to her daughter's list of non-existent health conditions for which she had no medical proof. For example, Claudine eventually decided that Gypsy Rose had muscular dystrophy and went on to force Gypsy Rose to use a walker to stop.
So she just kept making up illnesses and diagnosed her own daughter with it and treated her like she had all of these illnesses, which then led Gypsy, this poor little girl, to grow up believing that she was ill from every illness under the sky.
Sometime around whenever Gypsy was between 8 and 10 years old, she was riding motorcycles with
sad.
her grandpa and she scraped her knee.
I did get into a motorcycle accident with my grandfather, and it skinned my knee.
Well, as a result of this literally scraped knee, Claudine forced Gypsy Rose to then use a wheelchair to get around.
And she took me to the hospital and then told me that the doctor gave her a wheelchair, and I have to be in a wheelchair now.
Her sister told me once, Rod, Gypsy can walk. And I asked Dee about it.
That's fucked.
With her muscular dystrophy or with her disease, her muscles hurt sometimes. So sometimes she can walk when she's feeling okay, but it's progressive. It's going to get worse. And it wasn't long after that they were, they started moving further and further away. And there's nobody there to question.
They literally warped her perception of reality.
Why a young, perfectly healthy little girl would agree to do these things if she really didn't need them. But we'll get into all that eventually. So Gypsy Rose stopped going to school at a very early age.
Look how she has her. Like shaved head, in a wheelchair. She looks sick at this point. It's so dark.
By the time she was in the 2nd grade, her last day of school was already behind her. She ended up having to teach her own self to read at home with children's books, including the Harry Potter book series. And it is widely speculated that Claudine's motivation for keeping Gypsy out of school was twofold. Number one, to further isolate her from any friends or possible support systems, which would make her a lot easier to control. And 2, to further Gypsy Rose's abuse in private, where nobody from outside the home would be able to see evidence of Gypsy's suffering. Early on in Gypsy Rose's life, Claudine began to actively benefit from the make-believe health conditions she imposed on her daughter. She would bring Gypsy Rose to the Special Olympics events as a child and
oh my god, not the Special Olympics.
For disabled children and their families. Now, not only did Claudine invent fake health conditions, but she would also lie about Gypsy Rose's age, telling people that Gypsy Rose was younger than she actually was. When Gypsy Rose was 10 years old, she was crowned honorary queen of the Crew of Mid-City, which is a, quote, child-oriented New Orleans Mardi Gras parade. Okay, fine, whatever, honorary queen, it doesn't matter, but even then, Claudine had lied and told the local Mardi Gras crew that Gypsy Rose was only 8 years old, dishonestly reporting her age by 2 years to make her seem younger. And for y'all,
so they gaslit her age too? Holy shit! Her whole reality was just warped.
People that don't know this and aren't aware, being a part of a Mardi Gras crew, especially in or around the New Orleans area, is a very big deal. I'm from Louisiana, so I kind of just have that inherently in my mind. We were not part of a Mardi Gras crew. It's something that's kind of reserved for high-class people or frankly rich people. It's not something that everybody can do. It's not something that everybody has the money to do. You have to pay
Yeah,
them
it is
and
cruel.
stuff a lot of times. So being crowned an honorary queen in this way would have been a very big deal in the social sort of cultural society where these two were living. And so it was another way that Dee Dee was socially, financially, and otherwise enriching herself off of frankly lying about her daughter's non-existent health conditions. Now, like I said earlier,
leukemia, lung disease. Imagine being raised and like just being told by your caregiver, like, yeah, you actually have cancer and a brain tumor. Well, I am only like 10 years old. My mom's telling me this, so fuck. I guess I have cancer.
Now, like I said earlier, eventually Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose would relocate to live with Dee Dee's father and his wife, which would be Claudine's stepmother.
Were you sad at all when you heard she was dead?
Me? I didn't believe it.
But this living situation was not a saving grace by any means. During this period of time, while they were all living together with Claudine's dad and his wife, Claudine was arrested for various, quote, minor offenses, including writing bad checks.
There was something else.
She was a very filthy person. If it didn't go her way, she'd see to it that you would pay. And did we pay? Paid a lot.
And Claudine and Gypsy Rose wouldn't be living there for long before the dad and his wife, who were technically grandparents to Gypsy Rose, would start to express concern and disapproval for how Claudine was treating Gypsy Rose. These confrontations about Claudine's mistreatment of her daughter would become a regular part of life when they lived together. Now, this next part is wild and innocent until proven guilty and all that. But the dad and the wife became suspicious that Claudine was actively poisoning the wife with Roundup while they were all living there.
Supposedly, she was giving her some Roundup in her food and stuff.
She was putting some poison in my food. The same thing she had put in the plant.
Monsanto, the chemical giant.
So she was trying to kill her sister?
CEO Hugh Grant is with us at the table.
Mom?
Hundreds of people claiming they developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after using Roundup.
California couple who claimed a popular weed killer caused them both to develop cancer
the stepmom.
has been awarded a historic $2 billion by a jury.
I thought it was the aunt.
You can't escape controversy. The latest thing now, people criticized you for being the Frankenfood company. Now they're saying you're too successful at selling, and it's all very complicated. I just thought we'd start out by talking about how do you run your business for shareholders, defend your patent portfolio because you have a
Roundup is weed killer
business, and maximize profits and not be seen as a bad guy and something as essential to all of us and to the world as the food business.
Thank you for that framing.
Now with this new information, with the emails that came out, hopefully that'll show the world how reckless Monsanto has been with people's health.
It only gets better.
And she wound up, she stayed 9 months in bed. After that, she couldn't get up. I didn't think she was going to make it.
And they confronted Claudine about this, too. But facing scrutiny, transparency, and confrontation was not something Claudine took kindly to, so she moved up out of that house as soon as she could. Not only did she move out, but that's around the time she changed her name from Claudine to Dee Dee. Now, the stepmom would later claim that she suffered from a whole bunch of chronic
flags, bro. Like, why? If she's changing her name to just... it's just, what's even real anymore? You're just changing everything, not just about your daughter, but about yourself.
Health problems during that time, but experienced miraculous and immediate recovery when Claudine, aka Dee Dee, and Gypsy moved out.
That's evil.
So Claudine took her daughter, Gypsy Rose, to live in public housing in Slidell, Louisiana, which is like a suburb of New Orleans. And there, they received government funding from taxpayers based on Gypsy Rose's make-believe medical conditions. Now, I guess it's possible maybe I just missed it, but from what I was able to find in my research, it doesn't look like Dee Dee/Claudine actually had a real job of her own at this time. So she was literally just accepting handouts from taxpayer-funded government programs because she imagined that her daughter had something wrong with her. But she did keep herself busy, though. During this time, she would constantly be making up new, delusional, non-existent diagnoses for Gypsy and traipsing across the tri-state area to visit unsuspecting specialists. And it's really important to note and just remind y'all, none of these specialists ever really found anything conclusive about the health conditions because, like I already said, Claudine Dee Dee was making them up.
The doctors who are positioned is there to help her.
She would also take the time to shave this girl's head and eyebrows off to really just like, it's warped because she's trying to make the girl, when she looks in the mirror, she wants Gypsy Rose to see a sick person in the mirror, missing her hair, missing her eyebrows. It's psychological torture.
Who are positioned is there to help her. Didn't help her.
But Dee Dee was insistent and persistent that her delusions were correct, which resulted in Gypsy being subjected to basically medical torture for her entire childhood and well into her adulthood.
Gypsy grew up in essentially an alternate reality to what the rest of us live.
Exactly.
No mistake, she was abused, not only by her mother, but by doctors and medical professionals who refused to deny these unnecessary treatments. One doctor eventually would get suspicious of this whole scheme, and we'll talk about him specifically in a minute. But when he originally brought these suspicions to other doctors, the other doctors were like, no, treat them with golden gloves. This complete and total utter lack of diligence resulted in literally decades of medical abuse. So Hurricane Katrina allegedly apparently destroyed their free housing in 2005, so Dee Dee took Gypsy Rose to live in Missouri. By 2008, this scammer had finagled her way into another free house from Habitat for Humanity. And y'all, by this time, anybody who looked at Gypsy Rose would have probably believed that something must have definitely been wrong with her health.
It is the perfect town.
It's Mayberry. We're moving to Mayberry.
I remember my mom had gave me this little glass house, and she said, one day this will be real. And now it finally is.
The Blanchards moved into that house, built by Habitat for Humanity. A wheelchair ramp was built just for her.
By the time she was like 14 years old, she was basically bald-headed.
Which is, again, we love bald.
She was small in general, but also was very thin and frail for
who the fuck?
Her age, probably because she wasn't allowed so much as to stand up or walk, even in her own house, and her diet consisted of pretty much Pedialyte well into her 20s. She was still playing with dolls and wearing very juvenile children's clothing.
Oh no, yeah, that's a good comment. Mossy Goth put, when you see clips of Gypsy, she does seem like a disabled and sick young girl. She doesn't know how to act because of her mother, because of how her mother raised her. She didn't know that she was pushed and manipulated into acting like she had a disability and an illness. Sorry if that doesn't make any sense. No, that makes perfect sense. Because she was raised thinking that she's sick, and just intrinsically, you're going to start to almost like, your brain's going to want to behave in a way that matches the reality that's been forced down your throat. So if you're being told, you've been told all your life, you're sick, you're sick, you're sick, you're sick, you're going to start maybe behaving and having mannerisms of a sick person. So I think subconsciously, she was also like she was acting basically, but it wasn't her fault. It was like subconscious acting that was placed there in her by manipulation. You know what I mean?
Well into her teens, even though she didn't want to wear those clothes because her mother was forcing her to wear them. She was also extremely pale, probably from all of the unnecessary medications combined with malnutrition and perhaps lack of sun exposure. She was exclusively using a wheelchair to get around. Even if she wanted to walk, Dee Dee would force Gypsy Rose to use the wheelchair. And Dee Dee would often supplement this child cancer patient look with an also unnecessary oxygen tank. To top it all off, Dee Dee made Gypsy Rose wear the thickest, ugliest, most outdated old lady glasses imaginable, which were far from trending at that time. And just to reiterate, this was all completely made up or completely
Lord of the Rings guy
by Dee Dee's abusive delusions. For example, the reason for Gypsy's bald head, Dee Dee claimed the, again unnecessary, medications would cause Gypsy Rose's hair to fall out. But Dee Dee was actually shaving Gypsy Rose's hair regularly to keep this bald appearance.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
The reason for Gypsy Rose being toothless? Oh, Dee Dee would use topical numbing agents, including before Gypsy Rose's dental appointments, which made Gypsy Rose salivate all over the place looking like she was drooling. Coming as a surprise to no one, Dee Dee did invent a diagnosis in her world of make-believe that Gypsy Rose had defective salivary glands. Somehow, someway, she was able to eventually convince.
That's so twisted. In a way, she was intelligent enough, the mom, to be like, you know, we gotta make her look the part of like the stereotypical, like a special needs person. Yeah, make her fucking mouth numb so that she's like slobbering and shit all the time. Like, yada yada. That's so fucked.
A surgeon to remove Gypsy Rose's salivary glands, which,
And
when
morbid.
combined with Gypsy's unnecessary seizure medication, caused her teeth to fall out one by one. And maybe this is just a coincidence, but this is when the free stuff really started pouring in for Miss Dee Blanchard. Now, the full list is very, very long, but just to give you a few examples of the way that Dee was able to financially and otherwise enrich herself off these made-up delusional health conditions that didn't actually exist. For one, they would always stay in Ronald McDonald House whenever they would go place to place to get these treatments that Gypsy Rose did not need. They were routinely awarded free flights to see doctors at children's hospitals where Gypsy Rose received more unnecessary medical treatments in the form of literally torture, also for free. She was a Make-A-Wish Foundation kid. They got free trips to Disney World, including the lodging and the park admission. She had free backstage passes to all these concerts, including Miranda Lambert, who was huge at the time.
Yes, she did. Look at this $3,500 check from the singer's personal account, but that wasn't all.
Dee was living it up. She was living in the lap of luxury off of making these conditions up.
She was running up those fucking bags, bro.
Now, at this point, the obvious question on many people's minds is, why on earth would this girl Gypsy Rose go along with this ridiculous charade at all? The answer? She didn't want to. And there were many times she tried to break this forced character. There are many types of control that people like Dee can try to assert over a victim like Gypsy Rose. Some of these types of control are legal control, mental and or emotional control, and of course physical control. Legal control is when somebody has legal decision-making authority over another person. In Gypsy Rose's case, she was pretty much SOL until she was 18 years old. Dee was able to forcibly control Gypsy Rose as her child because Gypsy Rose simply could not leave or escape. Gypsy Rose also couldn't really tell any of her friends at school or in public because Dee had pulled her out of school so young. There was really nobody to tell. Dee was in the sole legal position to force Gypsy Rose to take these harmful medications and undergo harmful treatments, including literally surgeries. And during the time that
Oh
Gypsy
my
Rose was minor,
god. Getting unnecessary surgeries for fake shit. You know how dangerous that shit is? You're getting your body opened up for no fucking reason and drinking this kind of medication.
And during the time that Gypsy Rose was a minor, the unnecessary medications would be wreaking who even knows what kind of physical and mental havoc on her young, impressionable body and mind. Not only did Dee control Gypsy Rose's schedule, her socialization,
her reality,
and the medication she took, but she also controlled her diet, forcing Gypsy Rose to eat children's liquid nutritional supplements well into her 20s.
My tube site is finally all healed.
Looks great. Now, Dee also controlled Gypsy Rose's wardrobe, her media consumption, and her education or lack of access to it. She was in complete control of Gypsy Rose for 18 straight years, and it was, quote, legal. Then there's this mental and emotional control element, and this would be built up over the first 18 to 22 years of Gypsy Rose's life when she couldn't leave. At some point, Dee even forged a copy of Gypsy's birth certificate, moving her birth date from 1991 to 1993. Eventually, she would forge another copy of a birth certificate, moving the birth date from 1991 or 1993 back again to 1995. And I'm not really sure exactly what Dee's intentions were with
she regressed her age up to 4 years,
forging
like
this
making
birth
her up to 4 years
certificate,
younger
but the
than what she
effects
actually
were
was.
twofold. For one, it made people think that Gypsy was younger than she actually is, and perhaps more significantly, it made it seem like Gypsy was a minor for several years longer than she actually was, allowing Dee to maintain control legally, even though it was illegal, over Gypsy Rose's healthcare.
So not only now has Gypsy Rose been gaslit into behaving like a mentally ill person, but now to also behaving 4 years younger than her age.
And Claudine
like a
Dee
child,
lied
you know?
so much about Gypsy's age that Gypsy Rose herself didn't even exactly know how old she was for like 14 years of her life. And when or if those methods of control failed, Dee would fall back on Old Faithful: physical control. It is reported that Dee would forcibly hold Gypsy Rose by the hand
I don't know who the
at
fuck
all
those people were.
times when they were out in public. Sometimes Gypsy Rose would even disagree with Dee Dee about her health in front of others, or she would speak in a way that revealed her true mental competence was far beyond what Dee Dee wanted others to believe.
Even in videos I've seen since then, I'm like, yep, it's the same thing. It's like she's holding her hand.
And at those times, Dee Dee would mercilessly squeeze Gypsy Rose's frail little hand, crushing her knuckles and cracking them in pain. When Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose were in private, Dee Dee would mercilessly assault Gypsy Rose, hitting her with various objects, including her open hands and coat hangers. And I just want to give one example of how Dee Dee exacted these multiple levels of control, often employing them all at once. So after Gypsy Rose had officially legally turned 18, she did make at least one possible attempt to escape Dee Dee. At a cosplay convention event,
Hatsune Miku
to escape
mentioned.
Dee Dee event.
I had to, Chad. I'm sorry. It's on brand for my channel.
In 2011, Gypsy Rose left the convention center and went to a hotel room with a man that she had met at the event. Eventually, Dee Dee realized that she could not find Gypsy Rose, and somehow she did track her and
Anime
this
Expo
guy down. Dee Dee
LA.
comes busting in the hotel room where Gypsy Rose, who's legally an adult, and this man who she had just met were staying. And Dee Dee brought with her a copy of that forged birth certificate.
Oh my
She threatened
God.
to call the police on the man for taking advantage of a disabled minor, and the guy quickly wanted nothing more to do with Gypsy Rose, and they went their separate ways. Well, once Dee Dee and Gypsy Rose were back at home, the abuse continued as Dee Dee took a literal hammer to Gypsy's laptop in a violent rage. She continued her violent mania by threatening to, quote, do the same to Gypsy Rose herself if she
What a
ever
piece
tried
of
to
shit.
defy Dee Dee again.
Actual
And as
monster.
is her pattern, it did not end there. After that episode of unhinged lunacy, Dee Dee leashed and handcuffed Gypsy Rose to her bed for at least 2 weeks. Eventually, Dee Dee did tell Gypsy
Fucking
Rose that she had
bitch.
filed paperwork with the police, claiming Gypsy Rose was mentally incompetent. This led Gypsy Rose to believe that if she ever tried to escape from Dee Dee's hellish abuse ever again, that nobody would believe her.
She hit me with a coat hanger, or her palm.
It's just
I had to take so many slaps for depending on what.
mental, psychological, physical abuse.
Severe it was that I did.
Now I know what a lot of y'all are thinking. Okay, fine. But with all this lying and delusion to this plethora of doctors across several states, how didn't a single person notice this or try to intervene? And okay, you know what? Good question. They did. This one doctor, a pediatric neurologist who Dee Dee went to in Missouri, was not convinced that Gypsy Rose had muscular dystrophy. He even called the other doctors that Dee Dee had listed in Gypsy Rose's medical chart. But when he called those other doctors, they confirmed his suspicion that nobody had ever actually diagnosed Gypsy Rose with muscular dystrophy. Now, that doctor in his investigation
Who was
able
giving
to
them
find
all
a
the
bunch of
medication?
other holes in Dee Dee's story, and eventually concluded that in his medical opinion, Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard herself might actually be the one suffering with a serious health condition known as Munchausen's by proxy.
Wait, what is that? Munchausen by proxy is a psychological disorder marked by attention-seeking behavior by a caregiver through those who are in their care. So, okay, so she was kind of living vicariously through her daughter to get attention.
But she did have muscles that looked quite normal.
Now, they've changed the name of that, but that's what he was calling it at the time. And I'm not a doctor, and this is not a medical channel. But the TLDR layperson's definition is Munchausen syndrome is when somebody genuinely believes they have one or more very serious medical conditions, which causes them to seek unnecessary medical treatments and interventions. And Munchausen's by proxy is kind of the same
by
thing,
proxy,
except instead
yep.
of the person imagining up delusional, non-existent things about themselves, they imagine it about someone in their care.
To get attention, yeah.
My finger on it, but this really sounds familiar.
I don't know who those girls
the doctor
are.
caught Dee Dee and
Stop
some
referencing
lies
them.
about Gypsy Rose's health care, but he chose not to report Dee Dee to social services. For one, he claimed that the other doctors had told him to treat Dee Dee and Gypsy with golden gloves, whatever that means.
Analyzing all the facts, and after talking to a previous pediatrician, there's a strong possibility of Munchausen by proxy, with maybe some underlying unknown etiology to explain her symptoms.
We have a system, which is a big integrated system, that decided to adopt her and bring her, support her. So many people looking at her, knowing the history, knowing what she was going through, knowing what she went through, I would have been rejected at the spot. So all what I could do is put that in my note.
And for two, he doubted that the authorities would even believe him or take him seriously at all, given the drastic steps that Dee Dee had taken to make Gypsy Rose appear sick and disabled.
Nobody in the system ever said anything about it, and I didn't see it right to keep going and convincing other people, oh, something is not right here.
In 2009, someone finally reported Dee Dee to the police.
How were they affording all these treatments, by the way?
Don't sigh in relief just yet.
Like MRIs and shit. That shit's expensive.
Dee Dee was lying about Gypsy's health conditions, and as evidence, the tipster stated that Dee Dee had repeatedly given different names and birth dates for both herself and her daughter. Well, the cops show up to do a wellness check at the house, and Dee Dee admits to lying. But she tells cops that she
the money they were getting, yeah.
She claimed that she was lying in various places to, quote, make it harder for her abusive ex to find her and Gypsy.
Dolly, you mind if I ask you a few questions? Okay. You know what day it is today?
No, I don't. Computer right now, the braces, so.
Do you know where you're at? Tulsa? Okay. You know how long you've been here? Where were you before this?
In California.
But basically, Dee Dee again is able to lie and convince the cops that she was lying for a good reason, so she used a lie to cover up her lie or whatever. But that same year is when Gypsy Rose officially turned 18, in July 2009. But the forged birth certificate allowed Dee Dee to keep legal control over Gypsy for an extra 4 years. Dee Dee would go on to commit even more crimes to keep legal control over her daughter.
She probably used the forged birth certificates to light up. What's her name again? Gypsy.
Medical treatments.
Lie about her age.
At some point, Dee Dee forged another document, this time a power of attorney over Gypsy's healthcare decisions. And in my opinion, this step was really the final nail in Gypsy Rose's coffin of abuse, because it allowed Dee Dee to keep control over Gypsy Rose's healthcare decisions and treatments and all of that well far beyond whenever Gypsy Rose had actually reached adulthood. Gypsy Rose claims she never signed that power of attorney. It was a forgery, but she also knew that nobody would ever believe her if she said that. In an interview with Dr. Phil, Gypsy Rose told Dr. Phil that her mother Dee Dee would threaten her with these forged documents routinely. She would also tell Gypsy Rose that she, quote, had paperwork to prove that Gypsy Rose was mentally incompetent and nobody would believe her if she tried to basically snitch about Dee Dee. Well, long story short, Gypsy Rose ends up teaming up with another new boyfriend that she met on the internet, and she told him all about
fucking yikes, bro. Holy this motherfucker I'm sorry, bro. He looks scary.
She met on the internet, and she told him all about her struggles, especially with her mom. Now, that boyfriend took some pretty drastic steps of his own to eliminate Dee Dee, and he's currently serving a prison sentence for that. Gypsy Rose also pled guilty for her role in the whole incident, and it appears that she is remorseful for the decision, and she wishes that she could take it back. She was sentenced to prison, and recently, back in September, a judge granted parole, so she's out of prison early, and she won't have to
the fucking TikToks. The shit's gonna go down tonight. This is Gypsy. Babe, it's my evil side doing it. He won't mess up because he enjoys killing. Okay, so sorry, Gypsy got this Nicholas guy to basically be on board with fucking killing the mom.
Teaming up with another new boyfriend that she met on the internet, and she told him all about her struggles, especially with her mom. Now, that boyfriend took some pretty drastic steps of his own to eliminate Dee Dee, and he's currently serving a prison sentence for that. Gypsy Rose also pled guilty for her role in the whole incident, and it appears that she is remorseful for the decision, and she wishes that she could take it back. She was sentenced to prison, and recently, back in September, a judge granted parole, so she's out of prison early.
The fucking TikToks, bros.
And she won't have to serve her entire sentence. But even during the trial for that whole thing, after Dee Dee was long gone, Gypsy Rose was constantly confronted with the consequences of Dee Dee's illegal schemes and scams. During the discovery process, for example, Gypsy Rose couldn't even get the hospital to turn over her own medical records to her because of this forged power of attorney that Dee Dee had signed against Gypsy's consent. And Dee Dee was working hard from beyond the grave because she had actually put someone else in control of Gypsy Rose's healthcare decisions in the event that something were to happen to her. So the hospital was like, no, we can't release Gypsy Rose's medical records to her. We can only release them to this family friend in the power of attorney that Gypsy Rose never even signed. Obviously, y'all, and if it's not obvious, I just want to be very clear. I cannot condone Gypsy Rose's actions or her boyfriend at the time's actions. You know, we didn't really spend a lot of time getting into what all happened, and I really think that's because it's really been covered a lot. I say something that's already been said, but
that's why I clicked on your video to go into it. I wanted to hear about like what actually she talked about everything else, and then she just glossed over like the details of like the murder.
Share my story to be a cautionary tale so that the next person that might be in a situation like mine, they don't take the route that I did. I don't believe my mother was a monster. She had a lot of demons herself that she was struggling with. I didn't want her dead. I just wanted out of my situation. And I thought that that was the only way out.
Okay, see, that's the part where like I kind of feel weird. Like she didn't want her dead, but like she did. So it's like, which is it, you know?
Godejohn was convicted of carrying out the stabbing death and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Is it fair that he is incarcerated for life for killing your mom and you're out?
Well, I'm sure that we both have a lot of regrets. All I can really say is that I did my time. He's doing his time for his part. And I wish him well on his journey.
During her prison stay, public fascination.
I wish him well on his journey, on his life sentence. Just my final thoughts on that shit. If it's true that she like orchestrated the murder, on one hand, I kind of agree with her being set free. I agree with that, to be honest, because even though there was a way to not murder the mom, like there was definitely a way out of that situation without murdering the mom. Like I think he could have gotten this guy, that crazy boyfriend, to maybe even just break her out. Like if he was willing to fucking murder the mom for her, she could have just like told him like, yo, you gotta break me out of here, run away, and we're gonna report all of this to the police, yada yada yada. And yeah, that was 100,000% a way out. But here's the thing, here's why I think it's 100% understandable why she took that route. I think up to this point she definitely had spite like in her head, and also she wasn't mentally well up until that point in her life. Throughout her whole childhood, her reality was warped. Her mental health was absolutely ruined by that woman. You really think she was like in a rational state of mind? No. So that's why it's like I do agree with her being set free. What I don't like is people like celebrating her, saying like, you slayed your mom, now you're slaying the internet queen. Like, and then making edits of her. Like, dude, the whole situation from A to Z was fucked, and even the murder, everything about it was just fucked, and none of it should have happened. I just hope people on the internet stop being weird about her.